Before I move on to the second part of my previous video, I wanted to take the time to send a message to everyone supporting me through PayPal and Patreon. And I'm not talking about this video being that message. I've been sitting down to actually respond with a thank you through whatever means either service provides. Unfortunately, as far as I can tell, the Patreon site makes sending an email directly impossible. I have to cut and paste email addresses. And I don't even know what in hell PayPal is doing, as their reply system looks and works like a messaging app. I don't know if this is going through at all. It might be going through Grindr for all I can tell. I spent much of my day working through that. Even if I often have the sense that something is clogging the pipe somewhere, I've adopted a sort of fatalistic attitude that things are not going to work. They're just going to go south, because that's just the way things are. Not only does Murphy's Law apply, but I've seen just how far people go to erect barriers for other people to bounce off. And you know what I think every time I transfer your donations to the bank.
We can put that check in a money market mutual fund. Then we'll reinvest the earnings into foreign currency accounts with compounding interest, and it's gone.
But as people are expending blood and treasure to support me, I feel the least I can do is tell them where their money and well wishes are going. Now there's the day-to-day. That which you have to get through, and the ever-present potential for the next bad thing to happen. And I keep pushing on. Often, mornings are the absolute worst. I wake up and it all comes flooding back to me like the recap of a TV show. Previously on Your Fucked Up Life. I just let it happen. I can't stop it from happening. Once that passes, after all the thoughts of my sabotaged career and my self-sabotaged marriage and memories of my ex-wife, all those unpleasant accusatory flashes, all those flickers of what was and what will never be, I get back to thinking about what I'm going to write that day. Either what I have to start, some fragment of an idea, or some fragment of a revision on what I am currently writing and rewriting. Sometimes you just don't know where it will get you right in the feels. As part of trying to resurrect this channel, I've gone through folder after folder of graphics and come across pictures of me from a few years back and from 20 years ago. Pictures of my old bike, the design I did to put on a hat as a gift for my great uncle, photos of various camping expeditions, including when I went slumming with Occupy Wall Street to figure what they were all about. Graphics from my old photo montages that created the little lemur-eyed cow skull guy, and some pictures that I have no idea what they were all about. All are hard to look at because they're from another time, another life. And none more so than pictures of my wedding that I can't look at straight on. As part of social service requirements, I went through the most perfunctory psychological exam where I no sooner said that I don't cry that much. I wish I had that catharsis. Questions about my marriage and my ex came up, and I didn't lose it then, but thinking about it, I began tearing up, walking back to my ride. Memories are hard. Memories of that past life, and especially childhood. I was commenting to someone how there was so much anticipation, things to be excited about when we're young. I talked about even being homesick from school had an upside, as when my mother went out, sometimes she would bring me back a puzzle book. As part of things I can write but can't say, I didn't know if I should include that, considering how hard it is to even think about without choking up. I read comments, follow Twitter, and keep up with whatever tempest in a teapot is considered to be an existential crisis today. And I write and fiddle around in my photo or video editor. At least it keeps me somewhat focused and keeps all that other stuff at bay. I realize that many people might be trying to make a splash, thrash around in the water out of fear that if they stop moving, their own wave will crash over them. Of course, social media proves that for some people, there's no better distraction than taking it out on someone else. That in no way implies I have any sympathy or tolerance for people like that. Of all the ways to deal with your own pain, lashing out at other people is the most self-indulgent. Sometimes I wonder if focusing on the mean-spiritedness, the unfairness, and the underlying threat of violence in some circles, as I do, has a deleterious effect on my own mindset. Aside from recognizing that we're all in the same situation, I don't actually know how useful it is. After all, I was more than familiar with the ways of the click attack packs, the threat narrative playbook, the ways of people who use shame, insults, guilt, and an infallible belief in their own superiority, especially if they are demonstrably shitty human beings, long before these sort of people came in as my management at the Department of Commerce. Yet, there was not much I could do about it. Just because you are aware of what they are doing doesn't mean you can protect yourself or stop them. When you are in the situation where someone has decided to put you under the microscope, uncharitably interpret even the most innocuous words and actions, generally follow you around looking for something to be upset about, because that's their flex, their pathological road to a sense of superiority. Letting them know they've revealed exactly what they are doesn't stop them. They may, in fact, redouble their efforts because part of the delusion is their need to delude themselves. Maybe the only benefit is in knowing the problem is not you, it's them. Perhaps it's also a benefit to be aware that this witch-hunting, purity-testing, denigrating behavior, this need to control others, as normalized and presented as virtue as it may be, is simply abusive. And if there's one thing I try to do, it's to not allow other people being abusive, even society increasingly becoming pathological, which may be the rules by which they live by, be the rules by which I live. Which is no easy task, as I gather from those creators I follow who speak about living and surviving narcissistic abuse, such as Live Abuse Free and Knowing the Narcissist, which I really began following during the Johnny Depp defamation trial, as they went a long way to explain the sort of abusive behavior rigidly adhered to by Amber Heard. My most ambitious goal is to be able to live the sort of life where I'm no longer threatened by being at the mercy of these kinds of people, even if that means a decline in status and standard of living. Nothing, absolutely nothing, is worse than these sorts of people, and as getting in your face is part of their game, it's best to be in a position where you can actively ignore them. Not only is that good for me, and would be good for you, as a way to maintain the air of equilibrium and sanity they want to suck out of the room, but nothing makes the abusive narcissist, regardless of what they call themselves or what cause they hide behind, than getting no reaction at all. Much of my thinking involves recognizing what it is, even if I don't know exactly what to do. And so I sit down and write, trying to make some sense of it, trying not to give in to that sense of fatalism. Everything is a revision. I have to get the idea down, as sloppy and as amorphous as it might be, and then rewrite, either to tighten it up and then attempt to translate what I write into what I can actually say. Having to format one's text into speech is a really effective way to stop you from tossing around combos like arbitrary and capricious, or the single use of the word encapsulate. Sometimes I fiddle with design and presentation. I toy with the idea of using more static images. When I'm writing, I often come across images and do screen captures to save in the video project folder. But I am aware of the urge, which I noticed in a lot of other creators, of going on an ad hoc search for any tangentially related image that doesn't add much, but can be tarted up by applying some effect on it, or cop out with a little scroll or zoom. And I wonder if that's a productive use of anyone's time, especially anyone watching the video, and especially as the sound of the clock ticking can be deafening. And I read my messages. Lots and lots of people have their own tales to tell, whether their own lockdown horror stories or how they found themselves in a needlessly toxic situation. And so I listen. Some people have well wishes, advice, and suggestions, and I listen to that too. All of that I try to incorporate into my own sense of where I am and where I could be going. Right now, my immediate short-term goal is to find a place to live, to get enough support through these efforts to make that possible. Even when you are in a gracious temporary situation, as I am in now, no matter how much you try to be invisible, you can't help but feel like an imposition, if not an outright annoyance. I don't need much. In fact, the smaller the better, because I now no longer own any furniture save for a couple chairs and a futon. All I need is a room and some table from the Goodwill to put this computer on, and I'm good. Possibly I need to get a microwave, as opening up cans of human dog food is basically the extent of my cooking these days. Then I can continue to do what I do, which is mostly all I can do, which is this. I can simplify my life to eating, sleeping, and making videos. It's not as though I have or ever will have the distractions of a wife, children, or much of anything else. And sometimes you just have to reconcile yourself to that. I also recognize during the process of getting older, you and your world get smaller and smaller until you can fit in the box. Before the coof came down, during my 8 months of hell at the U.S. Department of Commerce, and subjected to the stress of being bullied and the general situational anxiety, my health began to collapse. I went through more than one bout of sinus infections and bronchitis, which was used against me. I learned that there are actually women on this earth, like customer satisfaction manager Deborah DeLay, that will refuse 3 different iterations of doctor's notes simply so they can use your illness, brought on in part by their treatment, as the thin edge of the wedge to open the door to your personal destruction. What a piece of shit. But here's how your support, your donations, make a difference. All during my moves, or just when I was trying to stay in motion, I was appalled by how easily I was fatigued and would be out of breath. I was long concerned with the ability to breathe before it became a national obsession. In fact, that they would do most of the packing and boxing made me decide on the moving shipping company that I did, the one that screwed me over and held onto my stuff for a month. Like customer satisfaction managers, that's just how some people respond to any vulnerability. They exploit it. Your support has made it so I don't have to rely on all-in-one solutions like that. This time I can get the moving van and also hire some day labor outside Home Depot or Lowe's to do the heavy lifting for me. That may not seem like much, but that's actually huge. That's an option. And there's nothing worse, makes you feel powerless, as being reduced to an option of one. Somewhere in the process of putting something like a life back together, I want to get a car. I'm not talking about a new car or even a high-end used car. A car, something, regardless of where it falls on the spectrum of being a beater, provided it's relatively reliable and doesn't turn into a money-sucking lemon. I've even thought, if worst comes to worst, of using or reestablishing the motorcycle endorsement on my license. A motorcycle may not be optimal, but they aren't as expensive as a car, and they are an escape plan. The only problem I see with a car is in financing. Now, of course, no one will refuse a lump sum, but getting financing without the instant validation of having a pay stub from someone else could be an obstacle. I know it was when I tried to downsize and get a more affordable place to live. And it's at those moments you feel tied to the train tracks. And losing your means of transportation is another oppressive limitations on your options and an absolute handicap in American society. Without a car, you can't even supplement your income doing deliveries for some outfit, a respectable third-party employer like Grubhub or Instacart. In the United States, there is nothing like functional public transportation within a region or between them. The only place you can actually go without owning a car is with the limited public transportation in packed urban areas. And I'm done with urban areas. I spent 22 years of my life in a place I had no affinity to, where I absolutely didn't dig the vibe, and with very little to show for it, either materially or spiritually. That's not where I want to spend the next years or my last years. If I had anything like a grand plan, it would involve going back to the Southwest. It's affordable, livable there. There's beauty and space, and the people were, I thought, my kind of people. It's totally unwoke, regressive flyover country, which these days is the only place one can feel safe. Even the wokest of the woke in Woke Central know everything, even for them, is just a stay of execution. I have no idea why I left the Southwest, save for the fact that I thought I was doing what I thought I should do. More importantly, I was doing what other people thought I should do. And for all the upheaval and personal and psychological sacrifice I made in that move, in the end, it was not repaid with even the most minimum of loyalty or even due process. In the end, the people that made me unemployed are also waiting in the wings should anyone contact them to make sure I am unemployable. The fact that they interfered with me getting unemployment demonstrates that they will be satisfied with nothing less than my destruction. Of course, then I have to think of what I did, what I could possibly have done to them to be deserving of that. And I come up with nothing. That's because I don't count. I'm not a person. I'm a thing. I'm a symbol. I'm just an identity to be struck down. And all the prejudice and bigotry on their part that implies. And I really can't think about that too much, as it's a bottomless well of anger and resentment. But I do have to admit that once people have had enough, it's going to get really, really nasty. and I want to be there to see it. But to do that, I have to survive. The urge to expand, to grow the channel, as the saying goes, to succeed because of the high cost of failure, takes on an insistence of its own. My having to lean hard on the whole subscribe, like, comment, and share mantra not only makes me feel a little self-conscious, but it also gives me a twinge of guilt when I eye-rolled this sort of thing in the past. You see, you can never know what people are going through, the situation they're in, to judge them like that. Which is also why you don't try to harm people to elevate yourself or promote whatever insipid little political point you're trying to make. And you certainly don't do it to make an example out of someone, to make others cower in the face of whatever arrogant sort of social engineering you're trying to engage in. In one sense, I have greatly expanded my sense of compassion. That is, compassion for the truly vulnerable and those who are really harmed. People who are harmed physically, financially, socially, and at worst, spiritually. In one way, I was always like this, as when I was horrified at Cedric Watson attempting to cover his own ass by setting up to fail someone who was all too vulnerable. But at that time, that was more about my own sense of ethics, sense of self, than a deep, visceral compassion. I think you pretty much have to be beaten down yourself to have that compassion. But compassion doesn't mean forgiving and forgetting, and it certainly doesn't mean apathy or pacifism. My compassion is for those who are harmed. I have none whatsoever for those who do the harming, especially when they treat it like politics as usual or an online game. As the pendulum swings the other way, which it must, and people have finally had enough, and as those who did the most harm now call for amnesty, we should be having our own Nuremberg trials. Let them sit in the dock and explain how it is that they thought their own racial theories, their own need for purity of thought, made them think they could do everything and anything to people. Remember, these people didn't just send mean tweets and harass people's employers. They burned, they looted, they destroyed people's lives and livelihoods. They engaged in violence by other means, and, when they could get away with it, the most cowardly form of pack violence. They supported violence. They made excuses for it. They never had any problem with it. The only time they ever had a problem with it was when they attacked people in the streets, and people, the nerve of them, actually defended themselves. And they are so toxic that during the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, these bloviating media talking heads, the blue checkmark gas bags and their minions, actually stopped to ponder whether people have a right to defend themselves, as if they were asking a serious question. Well, people do have a right to defend themselves, even against them. If I want to do anything, even at my own continued expense, it's to be part of that reckoning. Some things are obviously greater than yourself, and one of those things is trying to lay the groundwork so that no one has to go through the poisonous, pathological nonsense that we have had to tolerate for the past few years. So that no one dare think engaging in personal destruction is how the game is played, let alone a path to a better tomorrow. These people don't need amnesty. What they need is the judicious application of our wrath. Let's make that happen.
After close the